hard-working, a loving husband, no alcohol, no cigarettes, a recipient of medals, maybe even an honorary badge. That's how the biographies of many brutal killers begin. Impeccable, clean, ordinary. But the monster within, it can sleep for years, until one day it wakes up. And when it does, it demands blood and victims, lots of them. Sometimes to uncover the truth, investigators must break the rules, risking their careers, their reputations, even their freedom. But when human lives are at stake, some lines must be crossed. Arkhangelsk, Soviet Union. Winter 1978. A quiet, snow-covered town was about to be shaken to its core. Early one morning, prosecutor Tatyana Bozhenkova was woken by a phone call. It was the city's chief prosecutor, his voice tense, urgent. A woman's head was just found at a construction site near the Rus Cinema. Get there immediately. Minutes later, Bozhenkova arrived. Construction workers huddled near the gate, pale with fear. One of them had discovered a severed human head at the bottom of a pit. Bozhenkova was led to the trench. There, in the cold, gray mud, a woman's head. Her arms and legs had been cut off and arranged in a twisted cross beside her. Moments later, Donat Popov, head of the city's criminal investigation department, arrived on the scene. He inspected the remains with clinical focus, spoke to workers, scanned the area. Then, something caught his eye, a flock of crows circling a nearby spot. Popov walked over. There, buried shallow in the dirt, another woman's head. Two heads, no bodies, and no answers. The remains were gathered and sent to the morgue. But no one was allowed to talk. Everything was sealed. The authorities feared public panic, and for good reason. Initial theory, some kind of twisted prank by medical students. After all, the local med school was just down the road. Maybe they'd been studying cadavers and dumped the remains, asking local vagrants to bury them, who instead just tossed the pieces away. That was the rumor. And it almost stuck until Popov spotted something, a sheet of paper stuffed into one of the torsos. It had medical terms and diagnoses scribbled on it. Medical students, maybe. Popov wasn't buying it. The autopsy confirmed his worst fear. This was no prank. This was cold-blooded murder. The victims had been meticulously dismembered. No vital organs, no flesh. Even their skin had been removed in places. A butcher? Maybe. A surgeon? More likely. The cuts were precise, expert, intentional. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. That paper with medical diagnoses, it was the only clue. Popov made it his mission. He took the paper to every professor, student, and janitor at the nearby medical institute. No one recognized it. Where did it come from? Then Popov thought, clinics. He began visiting every outpatient facility near the construction site. One was just 100 meters away. When the clinic staff saw the paper, they gasped. "This is from our annual report draft. We threw it out 2 weeks ago." The mystery deepened. How did this draft, discarded in a clinic, end up stuffed inside a mutilated corpse? Tatyana Bozhenkova recalled a detail she'd dismissed earlier. A storm, days before the murder. Strong winds had howled through Arkhangelsk, trash bins knocked over, debris flying. Could it really be just a coincidence? Yes, and a tragic one. A meaningless scrap of paper, carried by the wind, had derailed the investigation for weeks. They had no suspects. Worse, no idea who the victims were, no missing persons reports, no grieving relatives, no bodies to match the heads. They were hunting a ghost. Then a small breakthrough from the morgue. A forensic expert noted both victims had signs of chronic alcohol abuse. They likely spent time at the city's sobering up center. Popov immediately searched the records of the detox unit on Bankovsky Avenue. He brought photos of the victims' heads. Horrific images no one wanted to see, but one man recognized them instantly. "That's Masimova," he said, "and that's Detya. I knew them, used to drink together." With the victims identified, Popov's team moved fast. They raided the homes of both women, hoping for a clue. Relatives were furious. "How dare you suspect us? We're decent people. We'll report this." But no one was backing down. The apartments were turned upside down. And then a name, a boyfriend, a live-in partner, Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov was brought in. He seemed confused, said he hadn't seen his girlfriend in days, they'd fought, she'd stormed out, he assumed she went drinking and would come back. Then detectives showed him her severed head. He stared at it, ran his fingers over her skull. "Yeah, that lump, I hit her with the stove. That one, I used the back of an axe. And that scar, that's from the little knife I cut her with." Silence. Even the officers were stunned. He spoke of her injuries like he was describing scratches on a car. Bozhenkova interviewed the neighbors. Everyone said the same. Constant screaming from the apartment. Kuznetsov had been arrested multiple times for domestic violence. Popov was convinced Kuznetsov had killed his girlfriend and maybe her friend too. They searched the apartment. Traces of blood were everywhere. Kuznetsov only smiled. "Of course it's her blood. I smashed her face on the table. I'm telling you the truth." He truly believed this was honesty. Detectives offered him a deal. Confess, and maybe the court would be lenient. But Kuznetsov denied everything. "No murder," he said. "No bodies. Nothing." Across town, a group of students from a local trade school were out for a morning run. It was cold, quiet, nothing unusual, until two boys strayed off the path. They returned carrying a heavy suitcase. "We found it inside a drainage pipe," they told their gym teacher. "It smells weird." Inside the suitcase, raw meat. Chunks of something pink, red, and not quite right. The teacher, disturbed, told them to put it back, to leave it where they found it. But by then, it was too late. Back at the police station, Kuznetsov was about to be released. News had just arrived. On the day of the murders, he was locked up. In a detox cell, he had an alibi. The man who had so calmly described injuries on his girlfriend's corpse hadn't killed her, at least not this time, which meant the real killer was still out there. Experts kept repeating the same terrifying truth. This wasn't a random act of violence. The dismemberment was too precise. A professional had done it. Someone trained, someone skilled, someone cold. Investigators turned their attention to doctors, surgeons, butchers. Every medical worker in Arkhangelsk was questioned. Then they moved on to the city's markets. They visited every meat shop, every butcher stall, interviewed each worker, watched how they cut, what tools they used, how they handled flesh. But nothing stood out. No one matched the killer's profile. Still, the rumor mill exploded. Stories spread like wildfire. A maniac is on the loose. He's cutting up people and selling their meat at the market. "We've eaten human flesh!" People stopped buying meat. Markets emptied. Fear took hold. Even Radio Free Europe, broadcasting from abroad, ran a story. Cannibalism in Arkhangelsk. The news reached Moscow. High-ranking officials called in outrage. What the hell is going on up there? Authorities were in a panic. Not only was there a killer, the entire food system was collapsing under the weight of fear. Popov's team had investigated every doctor, every butcher, and still nothing. No leads, no suspects. But then a new theory emerged. The victims had once been patients at a psychiatric clinic. Maybe the killer was one of them? It was a dead end. Interrogating patients with severe mental disorders was like chasing shadows. Some confessed to crimes they couldn't have committed. Others simply laughed or cried or stared blankly. Still, Popov believed one thing. We have a serial killer in Arkhangelsk, and he won't stop. Popov changed tactics. If they couldn't find the killer, maybe they could track his victims. He dug through 6 months of missing persons reports, focusing only on women. One case stood out. January 26, 1978. 2 teenage girls never came home from the movies. Inna and Sveta, both 15, students, at the city's horticultural college. Their parents were frantic. They were good girls, one mother said. Quiet, obedient. They never went near bad company. The police had assumed they ran off with boys, a teenage romance gone wrong, but Popov and Bozhenkova felt it in their bones. The girls had been taken by the same monster. They retraced their route home. It led right past the cursed construction site. Soon, a new lead. Locals reported seeing two young men posing as volunteer police. They fined pedestrians for jaywalking, stopped teens, walked the streets with fake authority. Suspicious? Yes. Dangerous? Unclear. The boys were detained and interrogated, but they had no connection to the murders. As the questioning ended, a phone rang in Popov's office. A waitress from the Dvina restaurant was on the line. "Our linen keeper hasn't shown up in days," she said. "Her name's Angelina Korolyova." Popov perked up. Could this be a new thread? He went to the restaurant himself. Why didn't anyone report her missing? This happens all the time, the manager shrugged. They vanish, get drunk, skip work. Popov wasn't buying it. He visited Angelina's apartment. Her mother opened the door. Barely standing, heavily intoxicated. They had to call an ambulance just to make her coherent. Eventually, she mentioned a name, Angelina's live-in boyfriend, a railway worker. Recently, he'd been given a new apartment. Popov felt the hairs on his neck rise. He contacted the railway housing department, requested a list of employees who had recently received new apartments. One address stood out, building number 13, Dzerzhinsky Prospect. Popov decided to knock on every door in that building. Apartment after apartment. Popov knocked, asked questions, showed photos. People answered. Some were annoyed, others confused, but one apartment remained silent. Apartment 13. Popov knocked again. No answer. A neighbor poked his head out. He's never home. Leaves early. Comes back late. Quiet guy. Keeps to himself. But lately, he's been blasting loud music all the time. Popov was intrigued. He pulled the resident records. Name, Vladimir Tretyakov. Occupation, railway repair technician. His work record impeccable, commendations, bonuses. A model Soviet citizen. Popov's gut said otherwise. The next day he returned. Tretyakov opened the door. Topora, a massive man, nearly 2 meters tall. "Where's Angelina Korolyova?" Popov asked. "Who? I don't bring women here," Tretyakov replied. Popov sighed. Another dead end? But then he saw it. A dresser drawer, slightly ajar, inside a woman's dress, the exact one Angelina's mother had described. Tretyakov saw Popov's face change. He laughed. "Oh, her, we broke up. I hate drunk women." There were no grounds to arrest him, but Popov made a calculated move. "Come to the station," he said, "just to fill out a missing person form." Tretyakov agreed. He pushed the elevator button, then turned to Popov with a strange, dark look. Popov felt something shift. "Let's take the stairs," he said calmly. That decision would save his life. At the station, Tretyakov was greeted like a hero. He was a well-known druzhinik, a civilian volunteer who had stopped hooligans, even saved a girl from a drunk attacker. Officers shook his hand. "Why are you wasting time on this guy?" But Popov wasn't swayed. 3 hours of questioning followed. Tretyakov talked freely about work, about life, about Arkhangelsk, but when Popov mentioned Angelina, he clammed up, stone silent. Popov knew this was the man, but he had no search warrant. He called the city prosecutor, begged for permission to search the apartment. Denied. So Popov took a risk. He had Tretyakov detained under a pretext, all belongings confiscated, and he sent 2 officers back to the apartment with him. They stepped into the apartment. In the hallway, an axe, razor sharp, recently used, scattered across the room, women's clothing, on the table, Angelina Korolyova's passport. Then they opened the kitchen, and finally, the balcony, 2 sacks, inside severed female heads, and more remains. Later identified as Inna Ignatieva and Sveta Yeremeyeva, the 2 girls who vanished after the movie. Tatiana Bodchenkova arrived minutes later. She thought she'd seen the worst. She was wrong. The kitchen was worse than the balcony. On the stove, pots, grease, a lingering smell. Inside the freezer, a bag of cutlets, already shaped, ready to cook. No one dared to ask what they were made of. Everyone already knew. At his first interrogation, Tretyakov saw Bozhenkova and sneered. "I'm not saying a damn thing to a woman. They're all pigs." A male investigator took over. Tretyakov spoke freely, coldly, calmly. "You should thank me," he said. "I was cleaning up this city." His biography? A textbook Soviet tragedy. Alcoholic parents, violent fights. His father was jailed. His mother abandoned him. That betrayal never healed. In Kemerovo, where he spent part of his youth, he helped slaughter livestock. Butchering came naturally. His adult life was ordinary. School, military service, a job on the railway. He married Arkhangelsk, but his jealous rages grew violent. If his wife even tasted alcohol, he beat her nearly to death. Eventually, she left. Then came Angelina Korolyova. At first, she was his everything, his ideal woman. But then, she drank. One night, he came home. She was passed out, drunk. Something snapped. "It all went dark," he later told investigators. "I strangled her, threw her in the bathtub, sat down to watch hockey." He only remembered the body the next morning. Panic. Then purpose. That's when the transformation began. He dismembered Angelina's body, packed the pieces into a suitcase, hid it in a pipe under the railway tracks, the very one those students found. But for Tretyakov, it wasn't over. He had found his calling. "I'll be the city's sanitary inspector," he said. "I'll cleanse Arkhangelsk." He walked the streets, looking for women he deemed impure. Victim number 2, Petrova, met outside a cafe. He invited her for a drink. She accepted. He killed 7 women in total, all inside his apartment. December, Anna Popova. January, Ekaterina Marchenko. Then Maria Gerasimova. And finally, Inna and Sveta, the 2 15-year-old girls from the cinema. He'd seen them through his window. They were laughing, chatting, walking through the courtyard. He invited them in, said he had music, drinks. What was there to fear? At trial, Tretyakov explained, "They drank. That means they were fallen. I had to punish them." He killed them both, then made food. Investigators recalled the scene. On the table were cutlets from the girls, and yet he kept their clothes. When asked why, he shrugged, to feel them. At one of the crime scenes, investigators found a notebook. Inside, pages filled with strange marks, symbols, tallies. Was it a kill list? Bozhenkova feared the worst. She sent it to cryptographers. Their conclusion: "It's nonsense. There's no logic here. Just chaotic scribbles." Still, the thought lingered. Were there more victims? Tretyakov underwent a full psychiatric evaluation. He was found sane, fully responsible. While the trial was being prepared, Arkhangelsk buzzed with horror. Rumors spread like disease. The girl's hair turned white during the murders. He sold human meat at the market. He fed his victims to neighbors. Most of it was fiction, but the truth was already bad enough. To avoid public chaos, the trial was held on a military base. As the verdict was read, Tretyakov suddenly bolted. Lights flickered, someone screamed, but guards tackled him within seconds. He never really tried to escape. The court sentenced Vladimir Tretyakov to death. All appeals for clemency were denied. On August 19th, 1979, the sentence was carried out. The butcher of Arkhangelsk was gone. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you think. And remember, some monsters don't hide in the shadows. They wear medals, go to work, smile at your neighbors until one day they don't.